Hello, good evening. Welcome to Bars and Bells Book Club edition. My name's Lauren.
And I'm Ian.
Hi, and I'm Stacy. I'm a social worker here in Guelph, and welcome to our Book and Body Club.
Yes.
So this is our second edition. We met last week and just kind of discussed why we were meeting and trying to create this space to discuss this book, Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle, written by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. And today we're going to be discussing that a bit more. I'm going to take some time to define burnout, how they define it in the book, and also the strategies to unlock the stress cycle.
Can't wait.
Yeah. And then you're also going to lead us in some movement.
Yes.
So Lauren and I are here as small business owners and personal trainers and movement enthusiasts. And we have met Stacy through professional channels here in Guelph. And we're very excited to connect and integrate that movement into our mental health. Last week, we discussed the reasons we were here, and then there's a lot of awareness that goes into the mental health. But again, tonight, I'm very happy to be here to contribute to that conversation and learn from Stacy, and again, how we can integrate our passions for our movements with our mental health pursuits as well. And just a little more of a brief introduction from Lauren here.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Last week, we introduced the book, and this week, the
Defining, and then also just part one. We're going to do an overview of the whole of part one, which is about 4 chapters, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to look at the different strategies to complete the cycle and frustration, kind of what leads us to feel frustrated, what that is, and how that contributes to burnout. And then we're going to hopefully be able to talk about connecting with our individual sense of purpose, which I think for a lot of small business owners, that's really part of what we do. And so I'd really like to tie it back to what we each do and how that kind of gets us through, because I think COVID has been hard on small business owners as well as lots of other folks, but we can kind of talk about that.
Great. Let's start with a little breath, Ian.
Right on. So I like to sit on the edge of my chair when we practice our breathing techniques here. But again, if we were laying down on the floor here in the studio before a workout, or maybe in bed, breathing really does help emphasize that we're all right. We are going to be okay. Last week, we discussed our box breath. We took a 4-second belly breath in, held it for 4 seconds, some exhales. This week, we're going to try to slow down that exhale. So first, I'm going to sit on the edge of the chair, rotate the mic there, and just place one hand on the belly. With the mouth closed if allowed, take a 4-second breath in, pressing the belly against the hand. And then just a nice slow exhale for now, for about 4 seconds as well. On that exhale, pull the belly button into the spine. Repeat a nice 4-second breath into the belly. And then a nice, again, slow 4-second out. Let's just repeat the same exercise in the chest. Take a chest breath in for 4 seconds. And exhale. Repeat one more time, a 4-second breath in. Often on that inhale, we feel the shoulders elevate and get tight in those traps. Fill 360 and exhale. Relax for a second and shake it out a little bit. From here, let's try to slow down that exhale. For taking a 4-second breath in and then an 8-second exhale. We'll try that 3 times in a row and we'll hand it back to Stacy. With a hand on the belly, a 4-second breath in. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now an 8-second exhale. Continuous flow, slow it down, pulling the belly button in, and repeat a 4-second breath in. Again, slow exhale, continuous flow of air, almost effortless flow of air from out, pulling the belly button in, and repeat a 4-second breath in. 8 seconds out. And then again, something just to reset that, wiggle it out, take a nice big breath. I like to call that our crocodile style breathing actually, because a crocodile emerges to the surface, takes in a big sip of air, and then goes back down and just says it's okay. So that crocodile style breath can really reinforce that the breath, we can handle it with a little bit less.
Okay.
Stacy, to you.
All right. So we talked about what kind of strategies we wanted to use, and I mentioned the extended exhale. And they knew exactly what I was talking about because it's a really important strategy when you're doing movement, but then also in my line of work with mental health, it taps into that parasympathetic nervous system, which helps us to know it's like time to rest and like recharge. And so we're going to be kind of getting to that as we go today, but kind of remembering that that's one way to kind of get that parasympathetic nervous system back on board and getting back into rest, recharge, relax. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about burnout, so I do have notes here. I'm not going to try and hide it. I just want to take a minute to make sure we're all on the same page because so many people have experienced burnout in different ways in different parts of their life. So when we're talking about burnout regarding this book and how they define it, it's really talking about that emotional exhaustion, being so frustrated, feeling kind of stuck and overwhelmed. That's what I got from it. Yeah.
I'm nodding because I completely understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, what's that?
Well, just in previous times, there was things that, once I get there, I have a couple days off. Or once I get there, I get to take this little trip. So it's been hard to find a way to express those feelings, but also not have something that's concretely there yet
Oh,
to look forward to or to grasp a little bit to or to work towards. Yeah.
to know you have that recharge coming.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that uncertainty and how that kind of escalates all of our experiences right now
Mm-hmm.
and not knowing when it's over.
And amplifies it a little bit too.
Yes.
And then
Sorry.
passing the mic. And then along with that, there's also the guilt feelings a little bit that go along with when Lauren and I are independent of each other might take a rest. Personally, we've been off work for quite a long time here, or at least on an intermittent basis. And although the cash flows haven't been there, the occupation on our mind has been at the forefront with our professional pursuits here. And it's just really tough to break that down, right? And again, just when we are overwhelmed or we have our day off, that it's okay to rest and that our bodies and our minds need that. We might want it, but it's hard again to connect those two things because there are those pressures to keep going. So just learning how to respect the rest and know when to rest is something I've appreciated reading about as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's that tension between like what I'm dealing with is like too much or am I not enough? Those kind of ideas. Or I don't have enough available to me right now to cope with what's going on, I think is what maybe a lot of folks have experienced during the pandemic, just not having those resources you would normally have, the supports of people or services that would normally be there. And what do we do? That whole kind of overwhelming sensation, that's almost like it becomes a full body experience. And really paying attention to, emotions are a bodily felt sense. And the spot there, that discomfort, is how burnout is just defined in the book. That each person has it show up for different reasons, but that feeling we've all experienced at different times and in different ways, but it shows up through the whole body. And so addressing it, not just by talk therapy, but being able to kind of work with folks around what things can they build into their life to allow for movement? What does that mean for them? Accessibility wise, financially, and also how their bodies move or don't move. And what does that look like? So those are all things I kind of work with the folks I meet with.
And we mentioned a little bit last week as well, when people come into our space and they do want to move, it's also teaching them that this is already a time of stress. So we might not need that added workout stress on our body, more restorative, like you said before, a restorative practice, something that gives us energy when we leave versus taking it all away and then leaving us with even less.
More empty.
So
how can it be a nourishing experience and not just something to kind of push through and push away from emotion?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No burpees needed.
Oh, Does anyone ever say, but I love burpees?
No,
No. Okay.
Very few people have ever said that.
I don't think I've
Okay.
ever heard it.
No.
Okay.
Are you?
I don't even think I can do a burpee.
Good.
I'm going to be honest with you.
You don't need to.
We won't try.
Lots of other
Don't
things to
test
do.
me on that. I don't.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So the book talks about kind of daily strategies to address the things that lead to burnout. They break it down into like, here's burnout, here's what it feels like, and it's a body sensation. And they say there's the causers of stress, but those are not always packaged up with the whole stress cycle. And that's what I loved about this book. When I'm working with folks with chronic pain, chronic illness, these are things that are going to be around a long time. When we're working with the pandemic, it's uncertain. We don't know when it's going to end, unfortunately, or how it's going to impact things. When we look at different kinds of barriers in accessibility for folks for different reasons, this is a chronic stress for them. To think that we have to remove the stress for people to have relief can be really intimidating. So it's good to know that, you know, there are ways of dealing with the stress cycle, independent of the stressor being gone. Yeah. So that's what really drew me to the book. I'm glad you guys are kind of finding it interesting too.
And a lot of times in our practice too, I had a parallel with where people report pain or where they are feeling sore. And the back is a very common one that comes in. And people want to go directly to that source. They want to go to their back and they want to either stretch it or strengthen it or twist it and turn it. But maybe where that's feeling isn't the actual cause. And that's not for me to know that. That's just to like explore those other options and how to deal with a pain or a stress in the back by maybe wiggling the toe as the extreme example, or just going for the walk to help the back, rather than attacking the back with physical treatment. Let's work around it. And then, you know, learn to work through the stress that might be manifesting in that one place.
Right. Yeah. And I love that so they emphasize that movement and exercise can be one of the most efficient ways to discharge the buildup of emotions, which I'm going to get to in just a second, because it's a really important part of understanding why it's tied together. But it's not the only way. So sometimes folks, they might be coming in to work out because that's how they've usually dealt with their stress. But if they're recovering from an injury, there might be other things that they can get out of training, like just kind of personal connection and having a lighthearted laugh while moving the body, and how that's really restorative. So,
and the play word might creep in there too, right? The opportunities to play.
Yeah.
And just also on that note, we were just talking to Stacey about it, actually. We don't have a car, so everywhere we go, we walk. And so some people might say, you do all the exercise, like you shouldn't feel stress, right? But just because you do all those healthy things and you do walk and you do take the time to pay attention to your body every day, doesn't mean those stressors aren't there. And that, you know, physical activity definitely helps deal with those stressors, but also we still need the other 6 strategies, to get us through those too.
Yeah, so I was kind of talking with Ian and Lauren about my kind of thoughts, and it's not just me, I read it elsewhere, it's not my words, but emotionphobia kind of in our society, and how, you know, we've been taught since we were kids, like it's not appropriate to express emotion in certain places. Maybe at school you have to learn to sit still and focus, but for some kids that doesn't really help them to focus. And what does that mean for their learning and how they kind of interpret things? So we're allowed to have expectations for different environments, but the key thing is to kind of come back and complete the stress cycle, complete the emotional response. That is a cascade of hormones and physiological experiences throughout your entire body, and it has to finish. And that's kind of what the book gets to in the first chapters.
And just how the book says, it's easier for some people, but you'll know when you've completed that cycle, whether it's a shift in mood, they say, or a relief. And we were also talking about it earlier. Mine is like, I have to cry. I have to let it all out. And if I don't, it's not done.
It's not done yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that feeling of getting through it.
And like this cry.
The ugly, big,
Cathartic
cathartic cry is what they call it in the book. Yeah.
Find me in the closet sometimes.
But,
Yeah.
yeah.
Did you have something?
Yeah. In the book, again, later chapters talk about the patriarchy that's ingrained within society and everything. But again, as a man, I definitely can empathize, and I'm with the readers throughout that whole book, and just that motionphobia. And even just here in the studio, you can read people a little bit, which is just a generalization, not the course of action. But you can tell that someone might need that pick me up. Let's just go for a walk. We don't even need to talk about fitness. Let's just go for a little walk. Well, other people might come in exhausted, but they need to do their swings or do their whatever. And that's probably an appropriate course of action some of the time. But when you are able to express your emotions in a physical setting like here, and be okay with a light stretch session when maybe your expectation was you're going to work out. But maybe, again, just letting your true emotions come through a sense a little bit, and just training towards that will help complete that cycle where maybe the high intensity wasn't as appropriate.
Yeah, and then knowing when your body does need that high intensity, like a cathartic cry, can be a really physical action and really tiring.
Exactly. Depleting if you did that every day.
Dehydrating.
Yes.
But then also just if it's, and if it's the exercise, if we worked out intensely every day, you're probably not left with a lot. So to do that as a once in a while, to express that, fantastic. But we do the cathartic cry every day or the cathartic exercise every day. That's that's draining, and it's really gives the other side of those hormonal responses to movement
so
that
then
way.
It almost kind of brings in that chronic stress. It doesn't actually allow for the completing of the stress cycle. And the rest, it kind of contributes to that cortisol expression.
The recovery.
Yeah.
So important.
The recovery is important. Yeah. So maybe actually I'm going to talk about that actual stress response as a physiological experience, and then we'll move into movement. Yeah. So I'm going to read, because this is not my area of specialization. I did not major in science. I did liberal arts. But this is grounded in science, and it is based in the best evidence we have is that a stressor, so anything that you kind of find intense, so it's scary or it makes you angry, that thing is a stressor. And it triggers the amygdala, which is part of the brain, like right in the core. And it's one of the oldest parts of the brain. And it's the lizard brain. Yeah. Makes sense with the crocodile breathing. Yes. Yeah.
Keep it going.
Yeah. Anyhow, so it sends a distress signal to the hypothalamus, which communicates with the rest of the body through your autonomic nervous system, which has two parts. It has the sympathetic nervous system, which actually acts as like the go switch. And it sends off a cascade of hormones throughout your body to make you ready to like fight, flight, so flee, run, fight back, get away, do what you need to do. And that still happens in today's, so if you get like angry at a meeting, we are taught not to fight with the person who's angered us, and that's really important. But the whole cascade of emotions still happens, sometimes even before the thought, like I'm angry, has occurred. So kind of recognizing that this is a physiological sensation, that the thought doesn't just put the brakes on it, it's still cascading through you. And so that sympathetic nervous system is like a gas pedal. And then the parasympathetic, which is the other side of the ANS, is like the brake. But sometimes it's like the gas pedal gets stuck in our society because we can't ever go run it off after the frustrating meeting or whatever's happened. So your heart's beating faster than normal, and you're pushing blood to the muscles and your heart and other vital organs. Your pulse rate's going up, your blood pressure's going up, you're breathing more rapidly, the small airways in your lungs are opening up, and then everything's there's extra oxygen being sent to the brain, so you're on alert and you're hypervigilant. And blood sugar is being released, and to help your body kind of cope with all of these things and have energy to do all these things. And then if the parasympathetic nervous system never gets kicked on because it's like, oh, this is done, that sense of being done, like we talked about, never actually happens, cortisol gets released and kind of keeps things elevated for an extended period. That gets released later when there's no sign that the danger has passed, to keep things kind of chugging. Maybe not as peaked, as when you were first triggered, but still elevated. And then that's where we find that lots of folks are kind of floating around in this elevated, semi-elevated state chronically, and that's chronic stress. And that's, in the book, that's what they describe as leading to this sense of burnout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cathartic in just the identification
Mm-hmm.
that yes, we're not alone.
Sorry.
That yes, we're not alone in these feelings, and that's what I'm feeling. You know, that there is the scientific cascade, rational reason. Yes, you can't control some of those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure.
I get hot really quick.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like,
and I can feel my hands go like that
clench
when
a
I'm
little
like,
bit.
yeah.
Which can be really nice.
Oh yeah,
That
right? That can be really
good.
helpful to not do anything else that would be less helpful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So again, just in a training context, again, a lot of the times in our class, when we are performing high tension movements, so if you could think of a plank or a squat or how we'll make our abs feel in just a second here, it's really encouraging to the body to then wiggle it out, to let it say, hey, there is this such thing called tension, and then there is this other thing called relaxation, and we want to be able to go from one to the other, and then kind of meet somewhere in the middle to have a little bit of both, because we do need both, but too much is, again, a little bit more of that, the paralyzing effect of stuck in the headlights, can't move, don't know what to do, versus being able to either react with that fight or flight, because that can be acceptable
really
and responsible as well. And then also to take that 8-second exhale. Hey, I only have to breathe 4 times in a minute. That's pretty interesting. You know, you can learn a lot from that, and that empowerment to carry over into those other aspects of your life.
Yeah.
Would you like to do the movement or me?
Are we ready to move?
Yeah, I think we can move. So that's the cascade. So that we all experience that at different points. And like I said, it happens before even the thoughts. So that the I'm angry coming online and thinking that, your body's already doing it. So just like, sometimes we're taught that anger or fear are a deficit. Like if we're feeling them, that's something, we've done something wrong. And that's the other thing I've kind of got from this book and in the work that I do is feelings are just feelings, and they happen before we can usually process them intellectually. And so you can be the most like Zen person and still get angry, and that's perfectly normal. So learning how to move through the stress cycle and complete the emotional experience when it's time is really helpful for the body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's move and kind of
move.
Yeah.
So last week, I'll just come up to the camera just a little bit closer here. Last week, we discussed the head, neck, and then that rib cage. And from here, just tying into the cycle, a lot of us would agree that if our neck was stuck in that position, long term, that's either A, not aesthetic, or B, stuck, and it needs to be able to move. It's not to say that text neck is a bad position, it's just we want to be able to get in and out of it. So if we started by looking straight ahead and isolating at the head neck here, modest efforts always, but tuck a chin where your chin goes towards the sternum. Then from there, lightly press your face, press your face forward towards that text neck posture, and then extend the head neck towards the ceiling. Then pull the crown of the head high, the chin would go low, and repeat one more time of flexing the head neck, then face forward, and I call it the roller coaster or the wave, and then the head, neck into the extension phase. Stay there, but now this time, pull the crown high, the chin goes low, and then from here, press the face forward, lift up, pull the crown high, and reset in the middle. And I might have only gone one way. Get that idea, and a little bit of a brain gym here. So here we go. It's just that same wave action through the spine. So again, this upper back rounding chronically would create problems. Not to say slouching is bad. We're all going to slouch. How do we get out of the slouch? So as Stacy is there, just nice and slow, round forward through the rib cage part of your spine. Then from here, push the sternum forward or the rib cage forward. Lean back just a little bit through the upper back, and then continue to pull that rib cage down onto the hips. Then pressing the sternum forward or waving through the spine, extending through, returning to center. Now let's try to get that other direction in the rib cage here. So from here, I'll lift my rib cage up, and then that candy cane flexion series through the rib cage, roll down, and then pull the rib cage to the hips. Hopefully that could feel like some abdominals. And one more time as we get that extension phase through the spine. And then channeling our nice ballet-esque port de bras as we fold forward. And then abs engage, rib cage down, and then extend through the spine. Waving, creating some room, very similar to that cat-cow in yoga, but again, working between those places. Some of them might be more stressful than others, some of them might be more readily available, but making that connection, which again, the authors discuss quite a bit about that literal connection between those joint segments or your emotions and then your response.
And pendulating, going back
and forth, yeah. So, yeah, great.
We're going to do a little, and one more movement. And this is a little pendulum-y. So we're going to reach outside of our body a little bit with a leg. Standing tall on a single leg, take your other leg straight and point it to the front. Noon on the clock. And then keeping both legs straight, pull that leg underneath and grow tall. Take that same leg and point it out to the 45. And then again, pull it back under you, trying to keep it nice and straight. Now out to the side, reaching long, hips are still forward, pull underneath. To the back corner, so slightly opening up in that hip, kind of like a skating stride, we're reaching behind us, and then pulling back underneath. And last one, we're going straight to the back. Point through that leg, out the back, flicking the toe, and then you'll roll over the toe and foot, pulling the leg underneath. We'll do the same thing on the other side. Rooting that foot, squeezing the glute, extending the hip, point front with that other leg, and pull to grow tall. Same thing out on the 45. Reach long, fully extending through the leg, and pull to tall. Reaching side, stacking on that strong leg underneath you, pulling under center. Reaching to the back corner, and pulling back. And last time, pointing out to the back, rolling over the foot, and growing tall. And one of the things that we really do love about movement and shake is that it connects the brain to the body. So thinking and being conscious of what you're doing too will also help take your mind off other things.
Yeah, so there's a mindfulness of movement. So often we can get caught up in our thoughts and it can get worse and worse. We'll just catastrophize, right? Mm-hmm. So really bringing ourselves back to the here and now and what's actually going on. And sometimes it's going to be really bad. I was going to say the S word, but I'm not sure who's watching.
Yeah.
My kids might be watching.
Can you say suck?
It might suck. Yeah.
One of the quotes are, we'll have a seat here. One of the quotes that our inspirators and teachers share is you have to embrace the suck a little bit. Yeah. Particularly in our case, if we have this really lofty goal of doing a minute handstand, which again might not be for everyone, but if you have that goal of doing a minute handstand or running a marathon or something along those lines, you're gonna unfortunately say the word suck here for quite a lot of that process. So again, being kind of process oriented and being present for the feelings that is, and maybe addressing some of those limitations and the disappointments, will really aim to stay vigilant in that process to get the minute handstand or the marathon, because we do again spend a lot of our time here. I'll speak personally in mediocrity a little bit, where you're not really getting what you wanted, but you're doing those things to try to get you to that position.
It makes it better in the long run.
Yeah, it does. It makes it more satisfying eventually, but really kind of eventually can feel far off. And that's part of the suck, right? Is that it does in that moment. Mm-hmm. But there's also things in that moment that feel good, like stretching or really refocusing to, oh, what does feel good right now? And I am breathing. Mm-hmm. And, oh, this is what I can control. So really the book is all about pendulating between, validating that this does suck at times, and this is where I'm hoping to be. And right now I can get through if I actually go all the way through the tunnel of the emotion. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and complete the cycle. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm going to try and find... that's where we're going. We already did number one. We also did number 2, the slow, deep breathing is the second strategy. So that does really connect the brain and the body again, which is kind of creating that dialogue, that communication. The third is positive social interaction. So we are doing that. So, and having some laughter. That's number 4. It has to be, they really do take some time to define laughter. I don't know if you noticed that in the book. When I was listening to it this past time, I was like, oh, because there are different kinds of laughter.
There's I shouldn't be laughing at the...
Right? Or there's
Pretend it's funny.
the pretend it's funny, and then it's like the deep belly laughs.
laugh.
And that's what's rejuvenating is. So it's connecting with someone who you're really close with or who understands where you're at this moment and being able to really laugh with them and feel understood and connected in that moment.
My belly laughs always surprise Lauren because they don't necessarily happen at the punchline or where maybe the film, editor, director really planned on like having the can of laughs, but it's those other moments that you get to have that emotional release and connect over such a perhaps silly moment. But again, being able to just have that laugh definitely can happen on a more like, hey, that's hilarious, but also just something about that moment just brought that sincere reaction that you couldn't control, right?
Yeah.
So that's really neat.
And that's that rejuvenating laughter. So having those people or watching those shows that really just make you double over, that's how you kind of get to that place of getting through the emotional experience. Affection. So there's lots of different ways to have affection with different levels of closeness. So if you aren't living with someone during the pandemic, it can also, if you're in a point where it's safe enough, you can get therapeutic touch services through like a registered massage therapist or something. And that can be really helpful if you're noticing like a lack of connection with folks or feeling a lack of affection and touch, which is a real need for humans.
I'm not the huggiest of persons, and in part I've been a little bit happy with the pandemic in that if I can say so, women tend to want to hug you when you first meet them. And that's not my thing. So now we no longer handshake, which I am okay with, but it has provided that opportunity to
have some space.
But then at the same time, recognizing that I do miss hugs of people that I didn't think I did.
Yeah.
Right.
And what hugs actually mean and what physical affection actually means and other types of affection. So it doesn't have to be physical touch, which is the other important part. Yeah.
Not that it's bad if you hug people hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
if you're it comes down to Lauren's comfort. And I think again, maybe a gendered expectation that the women friends that Lauren might have would be more, let's hug, hug, hug. We're like a hello, how are you is great. It didn't have to be the fist pump. It didn't have to be something else. It just didn't need to be a hug there. And as Lauren said, it really does make the hug or the touch that feels more appropriate, more rewarding as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes we've used that as maybe a shortcut. And now we actually have to use our words and discuss things. And for some, I'm an intellectualizer. I like to talk about things and I can talk for hours. That's why I'm a therapist. So I like being able to communicate through words with people and really find out what it is for them and find out what their experience. And sometimes the physical touch is a shortcut, which can be good and it can be bad because sometimes it brings you closer than you want to be or more intimate than you're ready for. And so just kind of recognizing the power of it.
Is sex on your...
That's part of affection.
Okay, is that there? Is that part of what we're talking about here?
It can be.
Okay. So just before Stacy came in, again, as a couple, the options for that physical contact, I think, do carry a lot of weight with this sexual association, or I'm cuddling because we're going to have sex, and great. But how about the other kinds of touch, which is the kinds of touch that I would share here? As Stacy was about to come in the room, Lauren was on the ground and I was massaging her feet, right? And just stretching out the feet. She wanted me to pull the heel and do that typical kind of foot massage stuff. And just doing that with the less expectation, but just that touch that it can be so rewarding to touch the toes and to move the small parts of your body there.
Absolutely. So there's all different kinds of touch and affection. And sex is part of it. And, consenting adults and, making your own decisions, better if you live with the person. You know. Yeah. Especially during the pandemic.
Right.
Right.
Right. Safety first
Yeah.
in all aspects.
Yeah. So then we talked about cathartic crying earlier, right after sex. So that's where it is on the list. And creative self-expression. So this is another one I really like when I'm working with folks. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
You passed that over.
Yeah. Again, something that I've done throughout the pandemic as part of, again, not a responsibility to our members, but a commitment I've made to myself on behalf of our members to write a weekly blog every week. And sometimes it's about our garden, sometimes it's about Lauren's runs, the weather. It doesn't have to be, again, related to our fitness, but just being able to articulate in words how I was feeling that week or what we were able to accomplish. Looking back, I have 52 plus now weeks of a journal that I really hadn't journaled before.
Okay.
So that was just this pandemic has again created new opportunities to express that side of things, and then gives you the confidence to, hey, I would love to get published in the Globe and Mail. So doing the things then that maybe align more with the fitness wellness aspect to try to get to the Globe and Mail. But if it wasn't for the creative process of writing things down and articulating in that way, I wouldn't have been able to progress towards that goal now of getting an article in the Globe. So
That's cool.
I definitely agree with that. Music has also been a source of that for me through the pandemic as well.
Yeah. I find when I'm working with kids, whether it's my own kids or as clients, tapping into that ability to like use expression and creative expression to work through emotions is really helpful. And it is more play-based. And if we can get adults to tap into that playful side of creative expression, that it doesn't have to be like a work of art you hang on your wall. It can just be for the like joy of coloring, and that there's something fun about using colors and making something that wasn't there on the page before. Yeah, I made I thought it was pretty cute little chalk drawing in my driveway with my daughter yesterday because it's sunny and it was, it's almost Easter and things. And I drew a bunny and I was like, I didn't know I could draw like that.
Are you impressed how easy chalk is as an adult?
It's so much fun.
It's so much easier as an adult than it is as a kid. Kids, just wait it out.
You gotta put that down.
There's so much more pressure. You're so much stronger.
I was just shocked. I made a really cute bunny.
Good.
And it was fun. And
Yeah.
it was like,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we made a chalk.
Well, we did make a really good sidewalk chalk last year. Hopscotch. But anyway,
Yeah.
my creative outlet would be in the kitchen, like a baking or just baking. Actually, I don't cook as much. But you get to, again, it's like exercise where it takes your mind off the stress because you have to read the directions and you have to follow it. So that's what you have to be thinking about.
You have to be in the moment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And tap into the senses. So there's the like physicality of moving, say like the batter, or if you're cooking, like chopping things, and like there's something nice about that. Yeah, there's the aroma,
smell.
tapping into the smell, and then getting something yummy.
Kitchen, the clean kitchen. Right?
Oh yeah.
That transformation can be quite.
I did something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So oftentimes that'll, when I'm working with someone who has a lot of depression, do something, do anything. What sounds like it would be interesting to you? It doesn't even have to be good, just interesting. What would be interesting? And creating some flow that way of just doing one thing in the day that's interesting. Then you can get to what would be enjoyable eventually, not at the start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's an interesting, I've never thought about it that way. We've had some tough moments, especially in January. And there has been times of that where it's like, what can I do just to get out of it, not just be wanting to nap all afternoon or watch TV or a little something. And sometimes it has been little.
Little's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just never thought about it like that.
Mm-hmm. So that embraces so many different categories of things. Creative self-expression. I've also had lots of folks who knit or craft and I would say knitting is probably one of the most mindful activities you can do with your hands and create something that's really soothing and ties people to potentially past experiences or connections with loved ones that are no longer here and things like that. So there's so many rich activities. So finding what works for you is really important. So I don't ever kind of just say, oh, you have to do this
We joked about the burpee a little bit earlier. And again, the exercise expectations perhaps around exercise, it has to be big or intense or sweaty or strong or heavy or those types of things. And then through the book, crying was in one of the ways to move. And again, like these other ways, they might not be the conventional exercising workout ways to move, but they can be those simple, small things. And Stacy alluded to the hands and just being in touch with the hands and
That's movement.
We're movement. That is movement too.
And it's
that's
rhythmic.
Yeah. And just that the hip circle, like we did a little bit earlier, that might be enough. Just a little bit, do a little dose. However, it might not be enough and you want to challenge more of your ballet in there and lift the leg off the floor and add to it. But again, those little bits of movement, but again, just the diversification of what movement is, according to those authors, again, about the cry, the touch, the walk. It never mentioned burpee that I read.
Nope,
so you're off the hook for tonight.
Yeah. And I do want to emphasize that for some of my clients, doing intense physical exercise is one of the great ways to manage like really intense feelings of anger or pain. And so not to discredit that, like if that's something that's helpful. Yeah. So making space kind of for all the different ways of moving and creating and being. Yeah. So they all allow for a release of chemicals that allow your body to relax. They reduce muscle tension, slow heart rate, blood pressure, increase digestion, and in time allow the body to rest and repair. So that's the parasympathetic nervous system that gets brought online through all of these different activities and ways of kind of connecting and what we were just talking about.
Sleep, right? Sleep is super important. Sleep isn't just rest. Rest can be more than just the sleep. But giving your body that opportunity to take those deep breaths, because again, our heart rate slows down when we're sleeping. Our blood, things settle down when we're sleeping. And Lauren's dad is a triathlete and he looks forward to his days off. Why do you look forward to your days off? Because that's where the magic happens. That's where that training adaptation happens, when you don't stress your body in that certain way for that time. And you're able to just, great. And then you can restart again. But again, her father, John, like definitely looks forward to those rest days. There's other parts of that rest that are anxiety inducing a little bit. There's those emotions tied into the rest, but definitely to keep going, to complete that next cycle of training. In that case, those rest days are super, super important.
Yeah. And I think that kind of ties really well into the next kind of part of part one, unless you had something to add on.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Which is like that idea of frustration. So what do we do when we get frustrated, or what do we do next? And you were saying like how rest can kind of bring things full circle. And that's discussed in the book.
It's hard to rest.
It can be really hard to rest.
Tough to rest. But again, it's that skill where you might have to embrace that suck or the process of being able to rest. And again, those little bits, and it could be resting for 3 minutes or 5 minutes, and then adding to either the time or the duration there as you go. Yeah,
so rest is one of my least favorite and most needed parts of having a chronic illness. So kind of my negotiating rest and not the need to be productive or the need to do something, or just the discomfort of being bored. Yeah, is a big one for me.
Yeah. Lauren's dad looks forward to rest. Lauren's mom would never want her to say bored, right? But definitely being able to be comfortable with that. You call it kind of like the neutral, like those neutral moments, right?
What was that word? Meaning neutral.
Meaning neutral, right? Yeah. So there's way more meaning to the rest than just being neutral, but again, being okay.
It doesn't have to contribute to the overall goal. So the other parts, I'm just noticing the time of part one is talking about frustration tolerance, or what I would call frustration tolerance, and how you kind of manage that experience as part of burnout. And then also kind of what anchors you through those difficult times of frustration and feeling overwhelmed can be your overall purpose and meaning, the big thing, I think is what they call it in the book. Yeah. And so what you were kind of alluding to there is that sometimes, going to the grocery store might not feel all that meaningful or tied to your big thing. But if you aren't, rested and fed, you can't then work on the next thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And everything kind of directs towards whatever your meaning or goal is.
Yeah, it contributes.
Or something.
It can be
big.
neutral.
What's it called? Something. The right word.
Something larger.
Something larger
is what they said in the book, and I like that term.
And I also identify with the rest, because it's hard when you're trying to reach that something larger to take a day off.
It feels like it's always there.
Right.
I really got to.
Right. Really should do that.
Cavaldo and his chin-ups, and he trained through elbow pain, right? This guy wanted chin-ups, and was trained through tendonitis in his elbows because he needed to get the goal. But ultimately, that had too big of a cost than if he would have just taken a day or a week or whatever the right timeline was away from that pursuit.
Yeah.
Let the body heal in that physical way. And then a person could be re-energized. Yes, I still want that as my goal. And then you can slowly prepare for what is next again.
This is one that's really hard for me. So folks, if you know me, you're going to be kind of laughing that I'm talking about this, because everyone who knows me knows I push it right to the limit. I worked through so much pain. I didn't know I had appendicitis that burst, and never knew until later, much later, a different surgery. And they're like, that happened. And I was like, okay. So that's the type of person I am, which is not ideal. And I've had to learn a lot. So here, yeah.
But that's such a strength too, but being able to be in touch and to be connected. And a lot of the times, again, we talk about this mind-body connection within our industry that transcends across many industries as well. And it's that literal connection of neurons in the brain, some wires that connect, and it's this literal signal that's being sent back and forth. And it's our job as trainers to interpret those signals from our clients, and then us to ourselves to try to get in touch. And again, it is that adaptation process. We're not fully adapted. Ignoring the appendicitis is a huge strength. It allowed you to carry on, keep going.
But there was a
cost. There was a cost.
Recommend it.
Don't do it.
But getting to learn to be in tune with what's going on again, and getting that out.
Yeah, that was a later learning, but it's definitely important.
You can still learn. Yep.
Yeah, finding that out really let me know how divorced from my body I had become in coping with chronic pain. To not know that, it was like a big wake up call.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And then I don't want to speak too much, but what have you learned from that experience, and how have you applied that to going forward? You had that moment where you brought the awareness increase. Oh shoot, that happened. And then what strategy have you used to moderate your strength, zeal there, to just be more in tune?
Yeah. So it's a lot about not pushing through and asking for help, I think, is really important. So they also talk about that when thinking about frustration, that when you get frustrated, you don't have to carry the burden all alone. There's people who want to help, who maybe don't know what you need. You need to ask for it, and that's okay. That's really key, I think, to how I'm able to do what I do now, and in a way that doesn't tap me out all the time. Yeah.
Great. And again, through this pandemic, there's a difference for us, again, about asking for help or expressing the need for help, and then actually accepting it. And whether that was acceptance in a home cooked meal delivered to your door, or acceptance in other means.
Yeah.
Okay, I asked for it. Now I need to let that into my life slowly, right? We don't need to go full on, but just to let that in, express the need, and then let that in so we can interpret and react to that.
Yeah.
That's good. You carry on.
So we were talking about, we wanted to talk about kind of part one, there's the chapter on frustration and how there's different ways of dealing with that. So they talk about the difference between optimists and pessimists. So folks who view things through rose-colored glasses, and those who always see the glass as half empty, and all of those things. And they talk about positive reappraisal, and how that can be really easy for optimists and harder for pessimists, but how it can be really helpful in dealing with a frustrating situation. We kind of talked about that a bit with looking at what are we working on when we're thinking about physical movement, and what's our goal, and how to kind of work within our capabilities.
I found that what was the wording again?
Positive
Positive
reappraisal.
Right.
Yeah.
And then she defined a pessimist and an optimist. And I was kind of thinking, what am I? And most of the time, I'm pretty optimistic, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then I definitely
Things that get you in the
right
pessimistic
in the
view,
pessimistic
the
view.
trigger.
But then also the positive reappraisal.
That word, yeah.
How not that it was in a bad way implied, but almost that it was easier for optimists. But sometimes it's like that positive reappraisal has to be so strong sometimes in the optimist still. Like
I think that's the thing is that I don't know, I'm kind of the person who will look on the bright side so often that if I'm having a bad day and I say I'm having a bad day, the last thing I want to hear is like, oh, just be grateful. Oh, dude, I've been so grateful.
Right.
Right. So it's allowing for like to say, oh, this sucks. Right. Allowing that space for that. And then also, the also piece. Reevaluating and taking that positive reappraisal of the situation. Like, what am I learning from this?
Right. And I think one of our views going through life together has been in the sense that the universe lays things out in a way that you might not understand. And sometimes you end up places that you didn't think you would have gotten to because of certain things. And that's even COVID, right? Like that changed our business model, and it did push us to do what we ultimately wanted to do. We just had to do it way quicker.
Yeah. And we were talking about this earlier. You asked me how I like doing virtual sessions with folks. I said, well, it's always been part of my business model when I went into private practice, something I wanted to do, but people weren't really interested. So more people are kind of taking advantage of that. And also the software available is so much better now than it was even 2 years ago. And I still like meeting with people in person. And so like there's the both and shows up again and again.
Can I read my favorite quote?
Yeah.
So there's a quote from the book, and it says, she was quoting somebody else. I rarely end up where I was intending to go, but I often end up somewhere that I needed to be. And that's kind of been a little bit of our motto through this too, of it's kind of sucky right now, but I think, and again, maybe that's the optimist in me saying it'll work out for the better.
Yeah, or we'll grow from this. It doesn't
or we'll
necessarily
grow or learn or
Yeah. I don't know. I have a hard time believing some of the things I've gone through in life were ever put out there. But I do believe in the power of being creative and working with what I've been given.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, for sure.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. The other thing I really liked in the book is they talk about choosing when to give up and how powerful that is when you're dealing with frustration. Has that ever shown up for you guys?
Oh, yes, like last week.
Or like last week. Yeah.
Just the other day.
Yeah.
And we've had the discussion of, okay, so we do stop, then what?
Right.
And so you do quit. What do you do? What's next? And that's when that question comes out where you realize like we like this. And right. And the challenge is challenging, but what we want to be doing. But I did also like that the book did say there is that little voice, and if it's saying you should quit, then you should also listen to that too. And being okay to make that decision. And there is a time and a place to make that decision, and there's a time and a place to persist.
Right. Yeah, I think I heard that little voice the loudest. I was just going back to work after my mat leave, and I got 2 interviews, and I landed 2 part-time gigs that together would be the amount of hours I wanted. And there was just something nagging at me like, oh, I don't know about this one. And I already accepted, and I had the laptop or the iPad or something, but it just didn't feel right. And I couldn't describe it. And I was talking with, I crowdsourced. I talked to my husband. I talked to my dad. I talked to a couple friends. They're like, well, it sounds like you don't want that one. You should do the other one and see what happens. And even if it's not enough hours, go from there. You're just starting back. You have 2 little kids. There's a lot to go on. And so I did. I didn't take both of them, even though it was the right number of hours I was hoping for. And I think it was good because ended up being more hours where I ended up starting, and that was a great position. And I made some really great colleagues who I still count as like friends. And yeah.
I know that little voice.
Yeah.
That's one that I acknowledge when I think about if I stopped this, how would I feel? If I stopped having a client at 8 p.m. on Friday night, how would I feel? Oh, better. I don't have anyone at 8, so it's okay. But those little examples, it's like if that's a bigger relief than the income that comes in that hour and that outweighs that, then that's what you need to go with.
Yeah, I even found that with having our own business, we get to set our own hours. But there was part of me that was working so many days, but little short days while I had my kids home over the pandemic. And then I was still offering certain evenings once they were back at school. And I was starting to be like, oh, why am I dragging? And it's like, oh, because I don't have enough time off, rest time, recuperation, mental downloading time. So maybe the hours are the same, but just not having a day off that I'm used to is really hard. So reclaiming, I was talking with you guys, so reclaiming my Wednesdays. So this is one thing, but I don't have clients on Wednesdays for the most part. And then if I do choose to pick up a client, it's really making that choice kind of actively and not just letting it happen. So it's not available to book and like stuff like that.
So don't try.
Not that day. Yeah. But yeah, choosing those things and setting it up so it makes sense. So putting the boundaries, that's a big word in therapy, is setting boundaries with people and time and energy.
Yeah, this COVID period has allowed us to reestablish our boundaries. Small business owners, it was more 7 days a week, X numbers of hours, and very similar to Stacy's intermittent schedule, where it was not a lot of hours all at once, but throughout the day, your work day from the time you woke up to go to work to home and now I'm resting is maybe 15 hours or similar. And you can do that for a certain period of time. And then thank goodness this COVID period came along and we were able to set our boundaries. And we have Mondays as our off day.
Right.
We work on the weekends, hoping people are available and taking that time to take care on weekends. And then on Mondays, that's when Lauren and I get to take care. Soon. We do work a little bit as it does creep in, and it is that process of, again, just embracing that Monday as our day off, and it is the rest day. And that has been a fun boundary to explore, although it's been challenging.
Always is.
Always is. We were working.
Boundaries are not easy.
You're working till noon on Monday, right? But I say this out loud to reinforce that it's our value. We want to take our Monday off, and over time, we'll get comfortable with that going forward.
Yeah. So the other one that we've kind of touched on just kind of briefly, I'm looking at the time, is this idea of connecting with the something larger. I think we've alluded to how it shows up for us and kind of keeps us going as we have these kind of different hours, or for me, pain or different things, but it kind of keeps us plugged in. So did you guys want to talk into that a little bit, or?
Yeah. So again, a lot of the questions I get in our exercise practice, like, why do you handstand? Because that's part of my something larger, where I feel like if I can express that confidence and the skills that go into maintaining wrists and shoulders and core, and it's a summation of all those parts that we're working towards something larger. It's those component parts and the nitty gritty and those exercise basics, as we like to call it, but we're doing something for the bigger idea or the bigger goal at the end of that.
So it's like a calling or a passion. It's an embodiment for you guys. It's an embodiment of some values. Yeah.
And a couple times faced in the pandemic of, but what else am I going to do? Right? Like if I don't work towards this something else right now,
you guys are building. Yeah.
Right. So what else do you work for? So it gave you that reason to do the work.
Right.
And to not just Netflix and kind of cozy into that life, but to continue at it. Something to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I had to reorient it when I first started my practice. Actually, when I first went into social work, like many years ago, over a decade ago, when I went to grad school, it was like, I want to work with folks who have chronic illness or chronic pain. This is what I'm really passionate about. But it took me almost a full decade to actually reorient back to doing this work, this calling, to work with these specific folks. And, I'm interested in helping lots of other folks, but my passion is to really connect with other folks with this lived experience. Yeah.
Something larger.
Something larger. Yep. So we are at time for this evening.
I had a great time.
Yeah.
This one, the lighting, I think, helps. We can actually see each other and
Maybe if we just finish with like that little sumo squat.
Let's do that.
Let's just finish with a
Yeah.
little squat here. Okay. So get your chairs out of the way or keep them handy. You might use it as a balance aid as we go through. Lauren and I, again, are working out here often in a space that's about 10 by 10 by 10, 12 by 12. So it's not that big, and we are capable of doing really cool things, if you ask me, without moving anywhere. So we're going to move without really moving anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I like this stance as our sumo stance, and we alluded to that tension before. And as you finish tonight, could you press your feet into the floor? And does that turn on your butt cheeks or pull up the kneecaps? Or does that not feel so good? Slowly relax. Conversely with that, start pulling the heels together along the floor. That might heighten the groin tensions in between the knees here. It also might turn on the butt cheeks. And then relax. And after tension, give it just a little friendly wiggle. If that felt okay, continue with us as we travel into a lower squat. Start by pulling your feet together. They won't move. There's too much friction between you and the floor, but pull together and control the descent as you go down in a squat. Now stay here, push your feet out. Does that create tension on these quads here? And then nice and control, stand all the way back up. Let's repeat that one more time. As we pull those heels together, controlling that knee bend as we descend with a level of tension and control, and then press the feet out as we stand back up. Give it that little wiggle, something that's again tensed, and then something that we can provide a little bit more relaxation. Coming back to that same sumo stance for the last movement tonight, we can pull ourselves down. And we talked about that pendulum, and we can stay here in the middle, and that might create a lot of stress in that goddess pose or right here in the squat. Then what if we swung over to this side? I have my one leg straight, my other leg bent. Then from here, what if we pulled ourselves across and went from that right side towards the left? Let's repeat that one more time each way, pulling and pushing. One side to the other, pulling and pushing. But ultimately, let's return back to that center position where we're strong. Push your feet into the floor, stand up, and then wiggle out those ankles or the wrists, or just give the whole body a little shake.
Yeah.
So there's that pendulum. Oh,
I'm just giving space.
yeah, great.
Yes.
So if we're talking about that pendulum, we have that tension and the relaxation. Somewhere in the middle is where we're most often more resilient to go back and forth between each side.
Yeah. And it's the same with emotion. So kind of working through that stress response and completing it.
Yeah. So thank you very much for joining us here. We're live next Wednesday, which is the 31st of March at 7 p.m. Part three of 4.
And it's part 2 of the book.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. And this, again, is available in the archive session. Share the link with your friends or family. Thank you very much for your time. And like the book tells us, and as we share with our members and online, take care. Have a good day and take care.
Okay.
Goodbye.
And you can also email us if you have any specific questions.
Yes. Feel free to email
barsandbells@gmail.com, or
Stacy at stacyifits.com.
there you go.
Great.
See you soon.
Take
Bye.
care.
Goodbye.